Welcome, everybody, to this Our Right to Thrive webinar with the lead artist, Ivan Riches is here, and Mik Scarlet, who we're delighted to have to present today's today's webinar. So a quick bit of housekeeping before we start. Automatic captions are available today. You can access these using the CC button in the Zoom menu below. We also have BSL interpretation from Therese Graham and Hayley Wiseman, and the session is being recorded and will be available at a later date. Please keep your mics off unless you are directed to turn them on to ask a question. This is a relaxed session and you can come and go as you please, but there will be no break today. Questions can be posted in the chat, or you can use the raise hand function to indicate if you'd like to speak. There are designated times for you to get involved. My colleague Kate is behind the scenes, so you can direct any technical issues to her in the chat. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Ivan Riches to give a brief description of the project. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Ivan and I'm the lead artist for Our Right to Survive. The title came from the last line of my poem, No Level Ground. In the chat, I've pasted in my first poem to music for this project. Filmed at the rally on the 30th of June about, I think it was called Welfare Not Warfare, organised by Deepak. So that's something that's in the chat that you can watch a video at your leisure. Hopefully I'm addressing people who would wish to post to write poems after Mik's presentation webinar, and send those to DAO for putting on blog. Bloggers are helping us, so that you can put your poems on a blog or put them into Facebook, the Facebook page, the DAO Facebook page. So I look forward to it. You don't necessarily have to be a poet. You can be putting in a piece of writing, or you could send a video if you want. So if you're if you're not used to using text, you can do that. It's just comments, ideas, poetry, anything that gets people talking with each other for this project. I will now hand over to my friend Mik Scarlet.
Thanks, Ivan. And thanks for asking, both you and Colin, thanks for asking me to be here today. Hello, everybody. It's going to be quick today because what I'm doing is squishing a course that might normally take up to 2 hours into about half an hour. So prepare, strap in. Let me first share the screen. That's the one, I think. Let's hope you can all see that. There it is. Brilliant. So this is a course that starts off with, or a webinar that starts off with, hey, let's think about what you'd think about in a kind of basic disability equality training session. It's kind of what I teach already to businesses, across the thing, government bodies, not you'd think they were taking any notice at the minute, and other sort of places like that. And applying it to how we use language. But let's get on with it, he says, Mik, because there's not enough time. So here's lots of lovely pictures of me. Now, I normally use this to explain that I've been disabled all my life. And I grew up thinking about myself in a kind of medical way. And then I changed when I sort of hit to puberty and started thinking of myself as like an individualistic way, almost like a superhero. And then, of course, much later, I got educated into the social model. And that journey has, this is what this course is about. This webinar is about. It's about the idea that people change, not only disabled people, but non-disabled people. And that the way we think about disability and impairment and the way we talk about it can allow us to create realistic people, realistic voices in our writing. So what we're going to do is we're going to quickly scoot through the first bit, which is what does disability mean to you? Facts and figures, knowing your audience, knowing how many people are out there. And we've seen a lot of discussion about this recently, haven't we? There can't be that many disabled people. Well, yes, there are. Then models of disability, then barriers to inclusion, which again could be a triggering point to think, actually, this is something I could write about. An experience I've had of being excluded could be a great jump off point. And then language. And what I'll be exploring is the language that I teach that is sort of the agreed standard now. It changes all the while. I'm training up at the minute a lot of younger disabled people to do this kind of training. And I say it's the one part of our training that changes so often that you don't ever need to worry. If you've done it 2 years ago and you do it again in 2 years' time, something will have changed in language. But then using this disability equality training, this theories, the way that thinking changed the politics around disability can be a fuel for your creativity. And then we'll have some questions. A lot of the stuff that I would normally say, hey, what do you think? I'm not going to do because I want to get this done so that we've got time at the end to really explore how we might apply what we're going to do today. So you won't be asked as many, what do you think questions as you would do if you were in my training officially. And this is one that's like a good example. What does the word disabled mean to you? When you hear it, what's the first thing you think of? And I think that it's a great way of starting when you're thinking about a character because it says, hey, what do you think? I know that what I think of now when I hear it is so different to what I thought about when I was a kid and what I thought about when I was a teenager. And it changes too. At the moment, I'm going through a patch where I'm being sort of ill quite often. So again, I'm thinking, I'm getting up. At the moment, I've got a nerve trapped in my neck that means my right hand doesn't have any sensation in it and very little grip. And I'm suddenly seeing a new sort of side to my impairment and to what others experience. So it's an ever-changing thing. Now, when I ask this of non-disabled people, they tend to talk about what a person can't do, can't walk, can't see, has issues with hearing, whatever. Or they talk about equipment, wheelchair, guide dog, cane, hearing aid. But it's a lot more than that. And what I tend to do then is talk about things like, have you ever been left out? Have you ever not been able to join in with friends? Have you ever been unable to understand a conversation? Just can't follow it. You've been judged unfairly, or you've had what you were saying ignored. You've been talked over or about in your presence, and you've been refused entry to a building for whatever reason. And what's funny is because I do this in a kind of much more squished down way to children, and all of the kids go, yes, all of those. And that's what I say to the adults. One of the big ones is the time that you could say yes to all of these would have been at school. And yet, as disabled people, we can probably tick most of those offers that, yep, I've had that. Yes, I've had that. And for whatever reason, we still experience that the kind of treatment and the expectation that you possibly had as a kid. I mean, there are loads more, people, look at thinking that everyone's with you must be your carer or your parent or your supporter or whatever, rather than friends and family and loved ones. So it's interesting, and it starts this journey that I'm hoping to take the people that I train on. Then we talk about numbers. How many people are there? Well, there's a lot more than people imagine. 67, this is the most recent figures, 67 million people in the country, and 24% of the population are described as disabled under the Equality Act. So that's 16 million people. 11% are children, so they are disabled from birth or from very young. 23% are of working age. So already you've got 12% extra that become disabled once they're able to go to work of that age group. And then 45% of people over state pension age. So obviously, as you get older, you join the gang. And by the time you're 80, it's the majority are disabled. So, you know, at the moment, everyone's going, oh, it can't be that many. And it's like, well, when you understand the legal definition, you start to see why it can be that number, and why, as we understand conditions and impairments better and better and better, we start to recognize that more and more people are. Also, without being funny, I was at an event only yesterday with a young lady who had been disabled for about 7 years, but she realized she'd actually been disabled from being very young, but no one recognized that she was disabled. She had ADHD, she had autism, she had dyslexia. All of these things were ignored when she was young, and she just was different. And now she asks for the support she needs. She thrives more than she did when she was young. So again, it benefits us and it benefits society for us to be diagnosed. So this myth of, oh, there's too many and not those many people, they must be frauds, because is actually because of the fact that more and more people are saying, I need the support to be able to give my best. And that's the key to what the training is about. What's funny is that only 7% of the disabled community use a wheelchair. And yet most people think of wheelchair users when they say disabled people. Only 9% have hearing or visual impairments. And 13% have a learning disability. So you're talking about the big three, say, the big four, actually, are quite a small population of our community. And yet they're the ones that most people would think about. And this, of course, is the sad bit of the session. Normally these come one after another as I click through slides, but I thought I'd do them as one so that when you get the booklet, it's easier for you to go through. But we have a huge amount of spending power. Disabled people alone have around 87 million, £1 billion a year. But us, our friends, our families, you know, our supporters, whatever, have a combined spend of about 274 billion. And I think we don't ever really appreciate that we are a fantastic market ourselves. So if you're making content for disabled people, that's a big market already. But if you can then say, right, and then once I've got that following, I can actually go out and spread the word and educate people. That's what our creativity can do. So, but whatever, there's a chunk of that that's available to artists. You've just got to go out there and get them to spend their money. Mobility is the most frequently reported impairment type, so getting around. And ironically, stamina, breathing, or fatigue is the next one at 35. So they kind of interlink, don't they? And then mental health is at 32%. So large numbers of our population have issues with just doing things in our society. And something that's forgotten a lot is that disabled people live with more than one impairment or condition, don't we? You know, people tend to think of me as Mik Scarlet, the wheelchair user, not Mik Scarlet, the guy that deals with chronic pain, who's got Erland syndrome and ADHD. But that's who I am. And of course, I'm getting old, so bits are falling off as well. My shoulders are knackered. So that's all different sort of things that come together. And it's one of those things as well for creatives that allows you to think, well, like I said, at the minute, I've got something that anyone can have, a problem with my hand. But how much more annoying is it when you've also got legs that don't work? And it's kind of like, oh, that's an interesting take. And so then there's all this sort of stuff about how do you deal with things that other people deal with when you are already disabled? Well, are you better at coping? I must admit, I've already found ways of spraying deodorant on without using this hand. But are we more adaptable or less? And another one that's really important is most disabled people live with impairments or conditions that cannot be seen. And I have to keep banging this home when I'm doing my training to make people understand that non-visible impairments are rife. And this idea that if you can't see it, they must be doing something fraudulent. It's a subtle way of saying you never know who needs assistance. You never know who needs accessibility. So it should be something you provide for everybody. Sadly, of course, it's not ever since COVID that seems to drifted away a little. But hopefully we'll all get that back into people's minds over the next few years, because we'll all obviously be protesting about everything that's going on now. Funny enough, I can be a little bit more political here than I normally can, can't I? Because, well, because I can, I hope, until Ivan or Colin suddenly pops up in my chat and says no. This, I think, is really important about why we've had this growth, I think, in the number of people saying, oh, I'm disabled, is the legal definition of disability is interesting, because the Equality Act says you are disabled under the Equality Act if you have a physical, I've got to read this, I've read it a million times, I still can't remember it. If you have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term negative effect on your ability to do normal daily activities. Substantial, and I love this, is more than minor or trivial. So basically, if you have something that's the opposite of something else, then you are it. So it's a really vague description, and it's part of the problem with the legal system. I'll talk about the other word that makes the Equality Act so interesting in a bit. And the way they describe it, this is actually taken from the definition on the government website, is it takes much longer or considerably more effort than it usually would to complete a daily task like getting dressed. Now, when I saw this, I thought, how interesting that I would be deemed disabled under this legislation, because having paralyzed legs, putting on socks and trousers and pants and stuff like that is more difficult. Yeah, I've never thought of that as being something that's disabling, because it's my everyday experience. It has been for over 45 years. You know, I needed help getting dressed from infancy because of my impairment. So the law says I'm disabled for something I just think of as normal, and yet it doesn't say I'm disabled by something, say, like not being able to walk and using a wheelchair. So interesting. So actually, of course, more people are starting to realize that they fall under the auspices of this law, because more and more people are realizing that they do have difficulty doing things that are, you know, daily tasks: reading, writing, understanding what's going on in a meeting, understanding people, taking public transport, going to work, walking down the street. Suddenly, when you think about normal daily activities, you start thinking, actually, a lot of us are disabled. So I genuinely think that we'll probably be finding a lot more of us are, which will annoy certain members of the press and government immensely. And long term means more than 12 months. But it doesn't mean, and this is a big one that I think a lot of people misunderstand, from diagnosis. It can mean you are waiting for diagnosis. It can mean from when you first spotted the symptoms. It could be when you first came aware. But say you first came aware of, for example, when I was 52, I learned that I have Erland syndrome, which is a reading impairment. It's a visual processing impairment, and I see things apparently differently to everybody else. I don't know that because I've only ever seen through my eyes. So when I discovered it, I realized that there are things that I do to counteract the impacts of that sort of syndrome, but I didn't know. So suddenly I realized that I have had this since birth, but I had no idea. The same goes for when I was diagnosed with ADHD. No idea. I always just thought it was part of who I am, and that was part of my personality. And now I realize that there are times when it affects me and times when it benefits me. But again, that has a long-term effect, a substantial and long-term effect on my ability to do normal daily activities, and it's been there since birth. So you would be deemed disabled from the day that you were recognized. And while you wait, you are still disabled because the law expects people to make provision for you. And that is called reasonable adjustment. Now, this is the big thing, the big one about the Equality Act that kind of people don't get. Reasonable doesn't mean, it costs too much or it's too difficult or really can't be bothered. Why can't other people have it if they've got it? Which happens a lot, especially in the workplace and especially when you're dealing with sort of government and things like that. The key is what it actually means is, what would any reasonable average person want or expect? And the way to understand it is, like, the legal system refers to the man on the Clapham omnibus. That's what it used to be, the man in the street. Um, what would they expect? And the way I explain it is, if you went to a restaurant or a bar and you were not disabled, you would expect to be able to access the toilet. You expect to be able to interact with the menu and have waiting staff that were polite and helpful towards you. Now, these things are not necessarily things that we can access. So, what are you going to do to make that possible to me? Well, it should mean that I am able to do things without assistance. So I don't need someone to operate the lift for me, or I don't need someone to pull me up the step. I don't need someone to, you might say, well, say a menu, you might say, oh, would you like me to read the menu? My brother is profoundly dyslexic and he doesn't like telling anyone. Um, so what used to happen was we would read the menu to him. But actually, what should we be doing now is that the waiting staff should go, would anyone like me to read the menu to them? And that way you just go, oh, yeah, cool. And I always sort of go, yeah, please, I forgot my glasses. So that Steve doesn't have to ask. But I think that's the thing, it's that just that tiny little bit of offering of support is a reasonable adjustment to make them feel proud of themselves, to make them don't feel like a burden. Don't feel like, oh, I'm asking for something unreasonable. Well, it's not. It's reasonable. That's what the law says. What would the man in the street expect? Well, mostly they expect things to be very easy, and we know that's not what we get. It shouldn't cost us anything extra. And when you think about cab journeys and how people charge extra for getting you in and out of a cab, well, that should be illegal. And it should be in place before they're needed. So you shouldn't need to ask someone, for example, to read the menu. They should offer it. You shouldn't need to, have gone somewhere for them to say, oh, we better get a ramp if you're a wheelchair user. They should have a ramp or it should be accessible. And again, this is something that I spend a lot of time focusing on for businesses because it's really important for them to understand it. Now, models. Models of disability, and I'm sorry I use this slide. I know some people said, oh, it's a bit sexist, isn't it? This is actually from a BBC program called Britain's Next Top Model with a Difference. It's a photograph of a group of very glamorous young ladies in pink dresses that was from a show that was like a special edition of a show called Britain's Next Top Model. And rather than include disabled people in the show, what it was a special show where all the models were disabled and they were going to pick one to be a token next top model. It shows the difference in how we are thought about. Rather than being just a normal, in with a load of models and being just one of the models, we have to have our own special show because we're not really models. And so the point of it is to start people thinking about this concept that there are ways of thinking about disability, because that's what models of disability mean. It's a kind of academic way of thinking, what does it mean to be? And there are models of all manner of things: aging, race, gender, sexuality, and it allows you to explore different ways that society understands what it means to come from that kind of group. Models of disability tended to have started off just after the Victorian era with this big one here, the medical model. And it's the one that says there's something wrong with us, that we are broken, that we need to be fixed or cured, that we need to be turned into the normal, the conventional, the textbook version of what it means to be a human. If we can't be cured, this is a tragedy. It's a sad thing. It's a bad thing. And that if we can't be cured, the person will never fit in, will never be able to do all the things that they could do if they were fixed. And so they'll need looking after, or they'll need special treatment, or they'll need, sending away. And it says to people that you are broken, that you are not as good as you could be, you're not normal. And for me, this is a way that I remember my childhood being. I was very ill as a child. I had lots of surgeries, lots of drugs and treatment and permanent prodding by men in white coats who never talked to me. And all they ever said was, oh no, that's not working the way it should be. And it was a big emphasis on trying to get me to be as near to someone who wasn't disabled as possible. And so I grew up thinking I'm not like all the other kids. And I'm not like, oh, like, what would I do? I don't know. I'm going to need someone to look after me for the rest of my life. I'm going to need, I'm probably going to end up living near my mum and all things like this. Much to the annoyance of my mum, I didn't do that. But, and the big one is it kind of stops disabled people from being able to choose how to live and achieve what they know they can, because it takes all the power away. Everyone knows when you go to see your doctor, you are very much in a position where they tell you what's wrong. You go for tests, you get treatment, and you're almost sometimes you're like, actually, I don't really need to be here. And so that's the medical model. It's changing a little bit in the medicine now, but it's still very much like that. And so if you imagine it's all of society treating you the way a specialist might when you first go to see them. And anyone that's as old as myself will remember that doctor attitude when they'd walk into a room and everyone had almost acted like they were some kind of deity had walked in, and they would talk about you over your head. Here we have a 9-year-old boy, he had cancer, blah blah blah, and they wouldn't even refer, and they might go, "Feeling okay? Good, lovely," and then they'd all walk off. That's the medical model in a societal way. The individualistic model, and the reason why I use this Superman thing is because the other one it's called is the superhero or superhuman model. It's like the medical model. Yes, we're disabled because our bodies are useless, they're broken, they're not like they should be. But while it's still sad, disabled people can do something about it themselves because they can overcome their disability and try to fit in. So it's up to us to push ourselves to be like everybody else, to try to overcome barriers ourselves rather than have them removed for us. And if we can't, we aren't trying hard enough. And this was something that became very prevalent around the Paralympic Games. And every time they pop up, you find an increase in kind of that idea that, well, come on. And you see video. I saw a video recently about someone offering wheelchair training, how to get up and down steps in a wheelchair. And I was like, it's very individualistic model. There's no way of getting in. So pull your chair up the stairs. And no one was mentioning the fact it's really unsafe. I wouldn't want to do it. I tried it a couple of times when I was young and it didn't go well. But this was how I felt about myself when I was young. I was trying to achieve as much as I could in spite of my disability. And I'm probably paying the price now. It basically says to society, you're okay. You don't need to change because they just need to try harder. And we're hearing a lot of that at the minute, aren't we? Get a job, go out to work, get off benefits. And it's like, okay, mate, yeah, love to. But until we can actually find a workplace that's accessible, it might not be as easy as you're saying. But you're placing the onus on us rather than saying the Equality Act came in 15 years ago, the Disability Discrimination Act came in 30 years ago. Why haven't you built an accessible society that allows more of us to enter the workplace? Aha. And it also sort of says that everything that's done the way it is fine. And it's really our fault if we can't do it that way. Um, and like I said, my brother being profoundly dyslexic is a reason why he didn't do well at school. But yet when he was diagnosed, he got a computer, very old computer, that kind of would read to him and take dictation. And he then went to university and got a degree. Now, what would it have been like if he had had that at school? He was expected to overcome his lack of ability to read, which is a bit silly. It's a bit like asking me to run up and down stairs. Then there's the religious model. Now, this one causes some upset. I've actually had one of my young trainers refuse to work with me anymore because I teach this, but it's actually a model. And it basically says that, like the medical model, it says that something is wrong with being disabled, but it's something decided by a deity, by religion or whatever, by God or just your karma or whatever. And it tends to see disability as a punishment or a test. So disabled people need to be more pious and pray for curing or accept their position because it is ordained. And it kind of sees that this is something a deity wants. It's not. So there are times when it plays into our kind of wheelhouse and actually makes it, oh, okay, we are more accepted. And ironically, this is how we were viewed during things like the Tudor period. Um, Lots of wealthy houses would employ disabled people to be in their sort of court uh, because they wanted to be surrounded by people that had kind of been blessed with this test, and so they wouldn't have to go to purgatory for so long, and all very strange things. So this religious model allows this strangeness of understanding of what disability is. The underlying thing is it does label people as being strong because they've been given something that only they could manage to cope with, or bad because they aren't being religious enough, or God has judged that they deserve this punishment. All of these take away the punishment, the power, not the punishment, the power from disabled people. And that's why lots of people didn't like them. Um, some people still live by, I mean, lots of Paralympians still kind of really think of themselves through the individual model. Lots of people, I still have discussions on my social media with people who still really support the medical model because they feel they want to be fixed. They feel that it is that everything that they face is because of their body and not because of something external. But for many people, especially as disability rights as a concept was growing, it just didn't work. There was something wrong. And so a new way of thinking was developed. And what's funny is it was developed by non disabled and disabled people together. And that was the social model. That basically says being disabled is part of humanity. That's part of life. So yes, we do have differences. We have different abilities, we have different conditions and impairments, but we are disabled by the fact that society is very much a do it one way kind of thing. So if you only ever go from A to B in one route, if you can't take that route, you're stopped from doing it. So that's a barrier that would disable you. And that's what it says. It says that basically just there are more than one way of getting to where you want to go. And if you take different routes, different people can arrive at the same point in a different way. And it says you can remove the barriers. That's the point. The point of the social model is saying we are disabled by society. We are disabled by the things that sometimes are totally beyond our control. And so, but they are, someone else has the ability to change them. And that is something society should want to do. It says that together we can make things that are fair, make a society that works for everyone. It values disabled people and it places us at the center of the thinking. The whole point of the social model is that, it used to be nothing about us without us. Ironically, I've seen very recently, and I love this, that they've crossed out the about us because truly it should be nothing without us. Every single part of our society, planning, policy, government, whatever, design should all be we should be at the table too, because people who aren't disabled don't know when it matters to us. And the truth is, everything impacts on us in some way. It shouldn't be that, oh, we're designing a new building. I suppose we should talk to some disabled people. And you're like, yeah, but did you not have disabled? You need disabled people at the table when you're thinking about the building you're going to design, at the planning for what goes in that space, let alone when you've got the architects in. And this is what it says. It says that we can remove the barriers. It may be that not all barriers can be removed, but there are ways of supporting people to get on and fulfill their potential. There's also the affirmation model, which luckily Disability Arts Online have a wonderful exploration of. It's to me, it seems a lot like the social model, but with a kind of positive spin on disability, something I've always kind of said anyway, because a lot of the barriers we face are around attitudes. So someone thinks being disabled is rubbish, so therefore they have a negative view of being disabled. Whereas if we lived in a totally accessible, inclusive society, that would not be the case. So they are tied together. And like I said, the simple way, and There are many others. Luckily, lots of my trainers have different impairments. So we've all got a slide here that kind of explains what we mean using our own personal impairment. Mine, of course, is I cannot walk upstairs. So is it my fault? There they are. Up you go. Why aren't you climbing up the stairs? Well, because I can't. Or is it society's fault for building them without considering, are they necessary? Is there a possible other solution that we could have? Is there a way of building two solutions together? And that's key to the social model. It really is that simple. And I mean, I don't know how many of you support the social model or how many of you are on that journey. I know, like I said, there are three parts of my life: the medical, the individualistic, and then the social. And I found the social model a liberating thing because I was set free. I was taught about it by the late great Vicky Waddington, a fantastic disability rights campaigner, who taught me it. And when she was doing it, it was almost an evangelical experience. I honestly was one person when she started and another person when she finished. And that one of the reasons why is because when I was very young, my dad died of a heart attack, and everyone told me it was my fault because it was the stress of having a disabled child that had killed him. And that had always been in my mind. I carried that right up. I mean, I think I was about 26 when I was taught this, 27. And it was a liberating moment because that went. And I suddenly realized it wasn't my fault. It was the fault of all the people who said to me, you killed your dad because having you was so stressful, it broke his heart. And I think there are lots of elements like that to being disabled, the subtle, permanent undervaluing of you. It's your fault that your family can't do this. It's your fault that your brothers and sisters can't experience this. It's your fault that whatever. And that's why the social model is such an important tool. What's great for you as creatives is it allows you to place characters along that journey. We'll talk about that in a bit. So let's talk about the barriers. He looks at the clock to make sure he's not overrunning. Well, a little bit, but we'll see. So there are lots of them. The big one is attitudes, that we might not be able to choose what we do, that we're emotional or shouty. I mean, how many of you have found yourself in a position where you're so upset that you either cry or shout or just look really miserable? All of us. I tend to explain to people that actually this is not natural. We're not like this all the while. And it may not even be that experience at that moment. It might be a chain of experiences that you are like the cherry on the top of, and then we break. That we need to be pitied, that all the people with us must be looking after us, that we can't work, or that we're not working because we're all lazy and fraudulent, too difficult, or it costs too much to make the change, that it won't be financially beneficial, that we must be unhappy and we must wish we weren't the way we are. I'm hopefully next week doing a piece on the BBC about this new gene thing where 3 people have made 1 baby to get rid of a genetic issue. And it's like, that's a big subject. And as someone with a cancer that was genetic, what do I think? And it's a discussion that we have to be there for, because if we aren't, it will only be the people who are afraid of disability who will be combining and having their views heard. The same for everything. I mean, it's the same for the assisted suicide thought, the same for this big go out to work thing. You know, we're not at the table. If we were, the discussion would be different. And another one is, of course, well, you don't look disabled, so you don't need help, you don't need support, you don't need adjustment, and you also must be faking it. Communication. Now, I do a lot of talking, and I'm very sorry, you wonderful BSL interpreters, because I know I talk fast. But I try to make sure that everything that I say is matched on the screen, at least in its simplest form, so that if you can't follow me, you can at least read the screen. But also, if you read the screen, you can't read the screen, you want to make sure that all the information is repeated. So I tend to say lines that are on the screen, even though it's against the trainer's code. And when I was doing my doctorate in training, I got told off a lot for doing it. And I would stand my ground or sit my ground by saying, no, this is inclusive, this is accessible. Not giving people enough time to understand what's being said or written. I'm sorry that I'm going so fast because I have to get it all in an hour. But normally there would be moments to think and moments to peruse. And I want you all after this to go away. We've got half an hour at the end to really think about this stuff and have a chat. Then go away and think about how it would apply to your practice. Allow yourself time. You might want to watch the video back and go, actually, I need to re-watch that bit. That's great. That's why we record them. That's why you'll be getting all of the slides afterwards, because it's allowing you time. It's written in as plain English as I can. There are times it gets a little bit complex. There isn't an easy read version, but you'll notice I use a lot of smiley faces. Well, they are there to indicate in a similar style to easy read what the theme of each slide is. Large font, I use 16 point or higher, mainly because my Erland's anything smaller, I can't read it. I don't have a Braille version, but when I'm talking to businesses, I explain that it's important. But also, I'm working on a project at the moment where, as alongside a print guide, I'm making an audio guide so you can listen to it like a podcast. We need hearing loops. You need closed captions. The wonderful British Sign Language interpreters, we love you. And also teaching everybody BSL. I know it'll do you out of a job, Terps, so don't worry, it won't happen yet. But how wonderful would it be if we could all communicate in BSL? This is the future. This is where the social model should take us. Websites, the amount of effort it takes. My wife is a web developer. The amount of time it takes her to make people understand that they need to make accessible sites is just unbelievable. And making sure you've got audio descriptions on videos. And they're just a few. This is a very long one. Now, the physical stuff could go on forever, but it is about design. Buildings being designed poorly. Large steps or steps when you could have another way of entering a building. Big gaps between things like trains, for example, or steep curbs on the street. Broken things, lifts. There's no point having a lift if you don't maintain it. At the moment, my block has got 2 lifts, but only 1 works. And it's been like that for many months. So we have a 1 lift system. If that goes, I'm trapped. This is the point. I know today that St. Pancras has lost their 1 lift. We need to stop building things with 1 lift. And maybe that could even be a creative jump off point. What do you feel when you go somewhere and the access provision that is there, 1, isn't good enough, and 2, then breaks? Places to sit, toilets. There's never ending battle for accessible toilets, but now, of course, we're realizing that that's not enough. We need changing places toilets so that everyone can venture out and fulfill their potential and enjoy their life. And blue badge parking and many, many more things that will last forever. So I'm not going to go on about that. The social model is it's not about whether you're sick or not. It's not about saying you don't have medical conditions. It's about saying that's fine, right? You will need medical input. You will need support from other people. That's part of it. But that shouldn't be something you're ashamed of, something you're embarrassed about, and it should be something that you lead. And it says to everybody, if we all work together, we can make the world better. And that's the point. We should all be working towards a legacy where the next generation of people who are disabled don't face all the barriers we did. Now I know I'm looking at the clock now thinking, yes, this is what happens when someone tells me I've got an hour and a half. It's not an hour. So language. Now this bit I'm going to rocket through, but I will send out, I think I sent Colin, but if I didn't, I'll send you it again. A thing about like good and bad language. Words matter. They matter even more to you because you're creative and you use words. But words enable us to understand how we feel about ourselves. They empower or they disempower. They make people feel good or they make people feel bad. And so words have real power. And when we're talking about language and disability, it is really important. So I use impairment to describe my condition and my various things that my body is different because I like demarking a difference between disability. Disability is that thing that is placed upon me by society, and my impairment is a thing I have, and it causes society to disable me. It's something I learned because I'm part of the early cohort of the social model. And younger people now are starting to go back to using disability to mean both. So it's becoming confusing. So they don't like impairment. And again, what a fantastic poem to explore why impairment is a great and then horrible word at the same time. And that's the key. So I think that that's one of the big ones to explore. And I've always thought there'll probably be a new word for impairment that comes along. I wish there would be, because I don't think disability works. I think it's why we get confused. So we're going to do a quick quiz. I'm not going to ask you for yes or no. I'm just going to tell you because I've got to get going. So, disabled people or people with disabilities? Well, hopefully you'll all go, obviously, Mik, it's disabled people. And that's really because the social model says disabled people. It's because it's like an active word. It's an adverb. It's an action on us. We are disabled by society. So we are disabled people. Like it's a blue sky. It's not a sky with blueness. So if you use people with disabilities, you tend to be going back. Oh, no, get it right, me. You tend to be going back to the idea that the thing that disables us is our bodies. So that's why, like I said about impairment, because I think it can be confusing. If you start saying, I have a disability and I'm disabled by society, if you wanted to do people with and you wanted to put people first, which is what it's called, people first or identity first, it should be people who are disabled. Sorry, my English degree gets in the way. Right, suffering from and living with. This is a great one for marking where someone is on their journey. So the correct term should be living with. I am living with spinal cord injury. I live with chronic pain. But many people would use suffering from when they are early in their journey. And you'll find most non-disabled people will use suffering from when talking about someone else. It's especially prevalent when you watch the news. Living with is empowering. It says, I'm getting on with things. I tend to say I live well with, because I do live well. I have a great life. So it gives me control. It gives me the power to explain that my body and my differences do not make my life less. But suffering kind of, well, we know the word suffering is quite bad because it makes you feel like you're like not in control. Ironically, like I said, my hand is weird. And because I can't feel it and I can't function properly, part of my brain is going, you're suffering from this hand. But then part of my brain is going, no, what you're trying to do is learn how to live with it until hopefully they fix it. But if they don't, this will be part of who you are in the future. And that's part of the journey around being disabled and learning to live with your impairment. Wheelchair bound or wheelchair user? Now, I know that you'll hopefully get this one. It is, of course, wheelchair user. But how often have I been called wheelchair bound in hospitals? It's on all my notes. It's everywhere. And many people still use it. And again, it's a great character tool, great placing someone where they are. So my granddad, who I mean, obviously died years ago, but when he was alive, he developed very great problems with walking and he had ulcerated legs and he needed to use a wheelchair. And he wouldn't use a wheelchair because he said he'd be giving in. And I was a wheelchair user by this time, so I'd go around to see him and he'd say to my face, I'm not giving in. And you'd be like, yeah, I'm not either, Granddad. My legs just won't carry me. Your legs are horrible. And you'd be much happier in a chair, using a chair as a tool of freedom. Instead, he stayed at home and stayed with my horrible, horrible nan. And I always think there's a perfect way of describing it. He made his life smaller because his brain wouldn't accept that wheelchairs are a tool. And so wheelchair user describes that. It's a tool, it's a liberation. Whereas wheelchair bound makes it sort of sound sad. Unless, of course, you're into bondage. That's a whole other set of poems that I'm going to leave up to you. Disabled and non-disabled. This is so great when you're talking about how to place people, because it should be non-disabled. Because if you're saying disabled is a thing that is placed upon someone, if they don't have that placed upon them, the only way to describe them is non-disabled. Able-bodied says, hey, your body works, so let's get working. And that's the problem with it, because many people who are disabled have bodies that work kind of okay, but have other issues. You know, like while my brother's dyslexia is in his brain, his body works fine. He can do everything with his body, but it's his brain, it's his mind, it's the way his mind works. And that's only disabling because he lives in a society that reads. It's prevalent in the Irish community, and that's because Irish people didn't start properly reading as a society until very, very, very recently. So it didn't matter if you could read or not. If your brain didn't work that way, fine. Suddenly it did. And this is why non-disabled is the term we use. But able-bodied is used by so many people, and it gives you that ability to really place someone, doesn't it? It gives you that ability to explore, why am I non-disabled? Why is it able-bodied? Why isn't it? And this one is mainly for people who interact with the public, but carer and then all the other terms, PA, support worker, companion. Well, it should really be those PA, supporter, support worker, or companion, because of the fact it's about empowerment. I always think it's like parent children. Like, a carer looks after you because they might love you, they're in a parental role. And so it's a bit like, would you like a cup of tea? And the PA, support worker, or companion, you would go, could you get me a cup of tea? It puts you in control. But it's also really important to understand that carers are proud of who they are. They're, a community of people that support a lot of people to live a life like they like, and support them to live and be as independent as they can be. It's a really interesting subject. But when I'm using this slide, it's mainly about teaching people what to put in, say, brochures or publicity around an event or something, saying we have a companion ticket. If you bring a PA or a support worker or companion, they will get a free space, something like that. But a carer's ticket. So, but again, it's funny, isn't it? Language is a great tool. There are words that we no longer use. Cripple, retarded has come back as an insult. Invalid or handicapped just completely fell from our sort of lexicon. Spastic, some of us older types will remember when that was the term, but then that got dropped, and mainly because it became an insult. And then we've got terms like mental, mad, and stupid. Now, these are all terms about mental health that were designed. There was like actual measurements of how mentally ill you were. And what's funny is those are all words that anyone would use to describe a night out. Oh, what a mental night last night. We drunk ourselves stupid and it was mad. But yet all of those words are also derogatory terms about people with mental health conditions. So it's interesting, isn't it? That words can be that. That's what's to remember. Then there's tragic and special and suffering and brave. So you've got the first three are very much medical. Brave and overcoming and battling, that's more individualistic. Superheroes, I'm bravely fighting my impairment. Then there are the new words. Inspirational. Oh, you're so inspirational. Well, have I inspired you to write something? Then I would take it. But if I'm inspirational because I'm here and I'm just doing something like everybody else, then I find it annoying. And the new word for disability that we've seen since COVID is vulnerable. You're a vulnerable person. And it's ironic because I hear it a lot in security systems and sort of business. And I say to people, what you don't appreciate is we are made to be vulnerable. It was people who were vulnerable to COVID. They were not intrinsically vulnerable. COVID made them vulnerable. So it's not something about us. It's something about how society changed. And a big one is they say that women late at night are vulnerable. And they're only vulnerable because of predatory men, because of the way we live in a misogynistic society. So change society and suddenly you're not vulnerable anymore. So that's why it's a tricky one. And another fantastic tool to explore. I say to people, don't say these ones. If I pray you'll get cured, things like that. I don't need to tell you, you know. We all have the right to use the language we like, we prefer. And that's a big key about that. And that's another really great tool. So let's get on to the tools, shall we? That's the point. What I talk to you about allow you to say, right, where is this poem placed? Who am I writing about? Where am I in my journey? So say you were writing about being newly diagnosed. You once weren't disabled, but you knew something was wrong. But you view, once you've been diagnosed and before you were being diagnosed, possibly through the medical model. Once you've done, then you become diagnosed and you explore all the feelings of that. And then you start to learn that this is the new you. And so then where do you go next? It might be the social model. You might learn about that. It might be the individualistic model. You might have come from a religious background. You might have still feel that the religious model is correct. These are all tools to place your poem, place your character, place the voice of who you're exploring in a place. And it gives you the ability to make them real and truthful. It's also that the same with language, and the same with all of like the barriers are all things. Once you understand them, you start thinking, actually, is it my fault I can't interact with this thing? Or is it the thing's fault for being the way it is? And I think all of these things allow you that sort of power. So, like I said, models are a great way of understanding equality and inclusion. But for you as creatives, they allow you that thing to create a voice, make a person. And I do something similar for people that are writing characters, writers for drama, directors and actors, saying that this is, if you're playing a role and they don't have to be disabled, but they might be interacting with someone who is, you can place your character by using the models of disability to understand how they think about the other person. And I meet lots of younger people now who are social model ready. They love it. And so they instantly think about me the way I want people to think about me. But I also meet people that think about me medically or religiously or whatever. And that's a whole other load of stuff you have to deal with. It allows you to create conflict or allow people to be sort of similar in their viewpoint. Language is also a great, like I've said all the way along, it gives you that ability to chart something. So suffering and living with is a journey thing. When you first get diagnosed and before, you are suffering from something. And then there will become a point, and I remember mine, when I stopped being someone suffering from spinal cord injury and developed into someone who was living with and then lived well with. And it is that journey. So it gives you that ability to do that. So there are loads of other terms and phrases. And what I want you to do, it may be in the next half hour and also when you go away, is to think about how you would write this, how you would explore this with your own experience, or maybe making up characters to allow you to explore it.